All right, welcome to this video on Microsoft Excel tools and techniques. This is part one in a two-part video series. Throughout this video, we're going to be talking about some essential Microsoft Excel shortcuts, formulas, tools, and techniques. Now, the overview, this video here is organized into three parts, three modules: the basics part one, the basics part two, and navigating data sets. Now, in the basics part one, here are the topics that we are going to cover in order. And without further ado, let's just jump over to this Microsoft Excel template. And what you're going to see right here in this master guide, it's the same items you just saw on that previous PowerPoint slide, but it's a master guide of, in total, 82 Excel tools, techniques, and tricks. In this video, we go through a little bit more than 50 of those. The remaining are in the second part. And we're going to go through them pretty much in the order that you see here. So the first sheet, module one, the basics part one, we're going to go through roughly these 18 steps in order. So that's where we're headed. Then we'll go into module two and then module three, and then for those who end up taking the second part in this tutorial series, then you would get into modules 4 and beyond. Well, without further ado, it says the first thing that we are going to do is adjust the column width. And if you look at this template file right here, and certainly encourage you to do all this as you go through, you're seeing a balance sheet, you're seeing an income statement. You know, I post these videos in a variety of places, so I know a lot of my accounting and finance and business students will watch these videos as they're learning accounting. But if you're stumbling across this in some other venue, you know, we are going to have an accounting slant to these videos, but these tools and techniques, you can apply them in a lot of different areas and functions. So we got a balance sheet, we got an income statement. You know, it's just not formatted that good right now. There's some blanks in there, and we're going to clean it up and populate all of those blanks. So first off, if we wanted to clean this up with the column width, so there's different ways that you would do the column width. In the simple way that I would normally do this is if you click right here between the A and the 1, right? If you click right here between the A and the 1, and then double click between, you could do it between any of the column headers, but I'll just do it between the A and the B. Double click. You can see it has automatically formatted the columns so that the width of those is as long as necessary to fit all of the data in there. It just looks a lot better. Stuff isn't as crammed together. So again, in order to do this, I click right between the A and the 1 to highlight the whole spreadsheet. Double click between the A and the B. I also could have double clicked between any of these, and would have worked as well. So that's the basic way that you would end up doing it. You know, just so you're aware, you can drag individual columns, and I still do find a need to do that at some point in times. You could drag individual columns. Occasionally, I will just highlight a few columns, and then I will drag, and it'll actually make every column that I've highlighted the same width. So if I think about that, highlight just these 5 columns right here. I could even go beyond that. And if I decide to make those bigger, if I decide to make those, I actually made them disappear. If I decided to make them smaller, everything that I've highlighted, those columns, would get formatted that way. You can click on a column and do a right click, column width, and then you could just type something else in, like 15, and it makes it wider, whatever you want. You can do that with multiple columns at the same time. Column width, 20. Whoops, I should highlight all those. I must have got off of that somehow. Column width, 20. There we go. Now they're all 20 wide. A variety of different ways that you can do it. But again, I usually will just click on something like this, double click between the A and the B, and then see how it looks, see if it's what I want. And I might want to then manually drag the C over there just to make it not quite so wide. You can auto fit just one column at a time as well. So when you would do that just by not highlighting the whole spreadsheet, but double clicking to auto fit that column. So yeah, just a quick format. It's all the spreadsheet is already starting to look better. Now, undo last action and redo the last action. These aren't necessarily the first couple things that I think you need to know in Excel, but I'm going to undo and redo so much as I'm going throughout these videos, as I just repeat my actions, that I just thought it would be helpful for you to see that. So, as an example, if I wanted to double click right here, now all my columns are auto fit. If I was just trying to illustrate something there and just show you how I could make them all smaller at once, and I wanted to undo, you undo with a Control Z. And this will work in any of the Microsoft products. I use it a lot, so I could undo with a Control Z. And if you hit Control Z a lot, or if you just hold it down, it would then undo all of the actions that you just did. I just held down Control Z and it rewound through the 25 different times that I changed the column with here in the last 3 minutes. Control Y would redo things. So sometimes I'll Control Z through a file to get back and look at what I did, 10 steps ago. And then I'll do Control Y to redo and leave everything where I want it. So that's Control Z, Control Y, undo and redo. I use the Control Z a lot more than the Control Y. All right, we move on to the fourth step here, begin a formula. Well, we have here we have a balance sheet and total assets just aren't filled out yet. The simple way to do this, by far the best way to do this, is just to hit Alt equals Enter and you are done. All right. So again, what that is, Alt equals Enter and you are done. I could hit Control Z to undo that. Alt equals Enter, you're done. And that's how you are going to sum some things up. You can look at this. You can look at this formula, B6 to B9, and you can see that it's highlighting B6 to B9. And it's working. It's working well, And the other way that you can get there is, I think it's through formulas. And let me go ahead and delete this. But you could get there through formulas, auto sum, and then hit enter. It's the same thing. Don't do that. It just takes longer. Okay, just Alt equals. Back when I used to use Excel, I don't believe it had this feature. I think someone would have told me about it. But I used to have to do, at the very beginning, we probably had to add some stuff up manually like that and just add them together, right? So equals, go up to the 1,000, plus go up to the 5,000, plus go up to the 3,000, plus up to the 20,000, and then hit enter. We could sum them up like that. I mean, that takes longer, and there's a chance I'd mess something up as part of doing that. Accidentally add a cell in twice or something of that nature. There still absolutely are some times where you need to add a couple cells together. I wanted to show you that plus right there. There also, as opposed to the Alt equals, what I used to do a lot of is I would just do equals sum, open parentheses, and then I would go to one edge of the stuff I wanted to sum up, hold down Shift and my up arrow key, and then do a closed parentheses. So again, what this is, equals sum, open parentheses, go up to something that I want to sum, like the edge of it. I just did that with an up arrow key. Hold down Shift, up arrow key 4 more times, and then hit close parentheses, and that ends up giving me my sum there. That, I don't know if I use that one at all. I suppose, depending upon how the spreadsheet was set up, there might be some rare occasion where I would need to do that. Maybe if I only wanted to sum up 3 numbers, like equals sum, and for whatever reason, if I only wanted these 3 numbers, I could do that. Because if you hit Alt equals, it's summing up them all. Now, granted, if I'm hitting Alt equals and I don't like what it's summing, I usually then will just hit the down arrow key and then Shift and then the down arrow key again to highlight what I do want to sum. So just some different ways that we use that the equals feature there. Add, subtract, multiply, divide. So we'll just look at that kind of stuff in a moment here as well. So total liabilities and equity, Alt equals, boom, just it's done. You're good. Alt equals. Now you go over to something like gross margin right here. That's a subtraction, revenue minus cost of goods sold here on the income statement. So it's equals, I go up to revenue minus cost of goods sold. One thing is I almost always use my keyboard whenever possible, and I try to limit use of the mouse. There are absolutely times when you need to use the mouse. But if you can just use your keyboard, I think you're generally going to find that it is going to be much faster. All right, so I just, as opposed to doing equals and then clicking on revenue minus and clicking on cost of goods sold, that just kind of slows me down. I have to aim and stuff like that. Gross margin, I just go equals up to revenue minus up to cost of goods sold, hit enter, and I am done. Operating income equals, go up to gross margin minus, go up to administrative expenses minus, go up to selling expenses. All right, so that's how you would use that if you're doing two of those. Now, if you were trying to subtract a large range right there, what you could have done is equaled gross margin minus the sum, open parentheses, and then go to one of these, hold down shift, and then use the up arrow key to go to the next one, close parentheses. That would be another way you could do it. You know, certainly if I'm just trying to subtract two things, I'm probably just clicking on each cell individually that way. But if I'm trying to subtract 10 things, I am going to be using some sort of sum feature. Now, multiplication, tax expense. This is operating income. We need to multiply this by a tax rate to get tax expense. So equals operating income multiplied by the tax rate. All right, so that's how we use the multiplied. Equals operating income multiplied by the tax rate. And I'll show you in a moment why I kind of liked that tax rate separate. And then for net income equals operating income minus tax expense. We've got another minus right there. What's nice about having that tax rate off to the side and when accounting and finance and other personnel build models, they try to have key input cells. I would refer to this as kind of a key input cell off to the side. So if that tax rate changes to something like I don't want to do it there. That was a mistake. If it changes to something like 35%, they enter it there, and now it's updated in our model. You know, if taxes go away, not likely, but maybe we go into a foreign jurisdiction where there's no tax. I did this more for exaggeration. You can see no tax expense, 100% tax rate. Now we can see the taxes take away all of the income. All right, so just different ways that I just wanted to show that in this formula right here, we did operating income multiplied by the tax rate and everything updated automatically. You know, and if you do stuff like revenue, let's say revenue changes to $100,000, you know, watch this tax expense, $3,640. It goes way up because when revenue went up, that fed into gross margin and that fed into operating income. So that's why we build the models like this and we just don't use Excel as a typewriter. The earnings per share is net income divided by shares outstanding. So I'll just do net income and then the divided by sign, shares outstanding, and that is your earnings per share, a key financial metric. Well, so we did those items right there. We did the auto sum, began a formula. Now we're going to clean this up a little bit. Format numbers in a comma format. We're going to look at decimals and we're going to look at hotkeys. All right, so if I look at this right here, you know, one thing I really want to put commas in there. I just, you know, especially when you're working with big companies and they're in the millions and billions and everything like that, you don't want to have to try to read all those zeros, right? You could make a mistake in how many you're reading. So you want to do something like highlight all of this information here and then put a comma in. Now, one way that you can do it, so you would highlight all those, you could go click on the comma right there. That totally works, and by definition, the comma will put in 2 decimal spots. I can Control Z off of that, so again, I just highlighted all these either with my mouse, or I oftentimes highlight a lot by hitting Shift and then an arrow key. Go ahead and click comma, and it works. Now, if you do this a lot and you want to be a little quicker, the shortcut on that one is Control Shift 1. So Control Shift 1 is how you put this in a comma format. Yeah, the control shifts, there's a few of them. Control shift 2 is a time. Control shift 3 is a date. 4 is a dollar sign. 5 is a percentage. And then 6 and above, I don't think those are anything. So I do control shift 1 more than anything. I just want to put my numbers here in this format. Now let's say that you do not actually want any decimal points here, all right? So you don't want 2 decimal points. You can see they're not really taking anything out to the decimal, so it's just adding information that is just kind of like noise, and I don't want to call it junk there, but it's just irrelevant stuff right there, right? So what we would want to do is highlight all this, and then we could decrease decimal a couple times, right? You can increase the decimal right here. You can decrease the decimal there. So you can go back and forth. So you could do a comma. By default, it puts in 2 decimals, and then maybe I would decrease it twice. You know, there are shortcuts. So after I do the Control Shift 1, I could do Alt. And whenever you do Alt for a shortcut, you can see I've pressed Alt, and then it's giving me a variety of options. So if I press H, it's going to be the home. And then if I go and press 9, it's going to decrease that decimal once. Alt, H, and then you can see I've got all sorts of stuff I can press here. If I do 9, it's going to decrease that decimal once. Now that to me is a little clunky, all right? So oftentimes I might, that decrease in the decimal twice, so I might just use my mouse and click there and then click twice on decrease the decimal twice. Now, what I want to show you, however, is the use of a hotkey, all right? So hotkey, sometimes also referred to as the quick access toolbar, a lot of people don't use these. This is, we're just a few steps into a basic Excel video, but I imagine that most of the people watching this, even some of the more experienced users, this is not going to be something that they have that they've used before. So what a hotkey means, and I'm going to show you. So I've set up my hotkeys with a comma and then a decreased decimal. So when I hit Alt, look what happens here. A 1 comes up next to my comma, and a 2 comes up with decreased decimal. All right? It won't be that way on your machine yet. So what happens is I hit Alt, I hit the 1, and then I go Alt 2, and it has put it in the format that I want. I could go right over here, highlight this. Alt 1 puts the comma in, Alt 2 gets rid of 1 decimal, Alt 2 gets rid of another decimal. And again, I did that all, while I was speaking. If this is one that I wasn't trying to talk slowly through it, it's just Alt 1, Alt 2, Alt 2, boom, done. Okay. I go down to earnings per share, and it's kind of like, well, there's 3 decimals. I think that usually gets rounded to 2, so I'll do Alt 2, done. Go down to shares outstanding, Alt 1, Alt 2, Alt 2, done. Everything is cleaned up. So how did I do that? Well, I go right here to the quick access toolbar, and if that doesn't come up, I think, these are called ribbons, so this is the home ribbon. If you right click here, it says hide the quick access toolbar. Now it's gone. Or you right click again, show the quick access toolbar. I think a lot of you probably have like the undo feature is right there, maybe the save. I don't think those are needed. Those are easy shortcuts in and of themselves. The undo is just a Control Z. We're going to learn in a little bit. The save is a Control S. They're just not hard. But stuff like the comma, Control Shift 1 is not, Control Shift 1 is a little clunky with my fingers. Alt 1 is a lot quicker. Right? Alt H9 to get rid of the decimals. I don't like that. So I'm going to do Alt 2. So go ahead to your quick access toolbar and click on it. And then it says customize it. I'm going to go down to more commands. And then when I get into more commands, I can see that I have my couple there. I've already set this up. Again, whatever you have there, it's maybe an undo, maybe a save, maybe a print. Who knows what you have right there. You could get rid of them if you wanted, if you're convinced you don't need them. If you think you might need them, don't get rid of them if you don't know how to get them back. I'm going to show you how to get stuff back, but just be warned, right? So I can click on one right here. I can go remove. I can click on the next one. I can go remove. And then I can go into my popular commands, this drop-down box right here, and I'm going to change it to all commands. And within the all commands, I'm going to go down and see to comma style. It's not the comma, it's actually the comma style, and put in an add. And then I'm going to go down to decrease decimal and put in the add there as well. So now I've got 2 here. Again, I had to be in all commands, and then when I was in there, I just kind of had to sort through until I found comma style and then decrease decimal. Now I hit OK, and there they are. They're in order. My comma style is number 1. My decrease decimal is number 2. So you can put in there, I don't know if it goes past 9 or 10 things. I generally don't do too many. These are the main 2 I do. I've got a different one that I use on PowerPoint. But if there is a shortcut that you use a lot, or a feature that you use a lot that is kind of, I'll just use the word clunky to get to and not easy, this is where you could end up. Creating a shortcut for that. So again, undo oftentimes is a default right there, but Control Z is really easy to push. So maybe even easier than an Alt 1, Alt 2, Alt 3, whatever. So I wouldn't mess with that. So that is how you do your hotkeys, or your quick access toolbar. Now I wanted to take a look at putting lines around the cells. We'll refer to these as borders. You know, if I look at this right here, where some natural places for the borders would probably be beneath equipment, would be beneath retained earnings, and you can see I'm just going to the cell and then going up to the home ribbon, kind of the font area within that ribbon, and then I've got my borders right there, and clicking on that bottom border. There are shortcuts that you can get, that you could do as well. I don't use that one enough, but you could go Alt H, B for borders, and then O for bottom border. That's not super duper quick. If you did a lot, you'd probably create a hotkey for it. But I could go under cost of goods sold and put in a border, under selling expenses, put in a border, under tax expense, put in a border. And I've got it cleaned up a little bit here. 2 things on this, all right, is that first off, the bottom border used to be very popular, but it has become less popular because if people actually will insert a row, and we'll talk more about inserting and deleting rows in a bit, but one way you can just insert a row, you could right click on the 10 and then you could just hit insert for insert a row. Now you'll notice that this formula right here, B6 to B9, it didn't update. Honestly, it normally does. I would have expected that to update. Let's see. I think if I put something in there, yeah, it's crazy. It updated on a live basis. Maybe we've got other assets. Maybe I've gotten something called Goodwill. Yeah, what's crazy is it did actually update there. It didn't used to update, and now it does, even though you couldn't tell if it was going to or not. But a problem is we still got this line, which is kind of like a subtotal line. We've got it in the wrong place. And you frequently do build models and then insert additional rows before a total, right? So I'll Control Z to get out of all of these. And what I'm going to do, as opposed to the bottom border, is I'm going to do a top border right here. Click the top border, because now if I want to insert a row before row 10, right click, insert, you can see the border has moved down. I can type a dollar amount in, it'll update, and the border has moved down. So that's, I'm still trying to get in the habit of doing that because I used bottom borders forever. So I'm still seeing if I can, if I can more consistently make that change. So if I look at this right here, I would go to total assets, I would do a top border, I would go to total liabilities and equity, and do a top border. Now, one more comment on this one, kind of as we are going through this, is the repeat action. I love the F4 feature. It's got two different ways that I use the F4 feature, and I'm a big fan of both of them. But if I Control Z to undo a couple times, what the F4 feature does is if I go right here and I put top border, as opposed to having to go to my new destination and then going back to click on top border again or learning the shortcut for it in order to do it, I can just go anywhere else and do something like hit F4. And F4 repeats the previous action. So I could go where gross margin is and hit F4 and put a line above that. Operating income with an F4, net income with an F4. Now I've got a line in there. I've always repeated that action. In this, I do this with a lot of different formatting items in all the Microsoft products. You know, if you wanted to make something yellow, like a cell yellow, and I'll eventually undo this, but you click it the first time, you go to another cell you want to make yellow, you just hit F4 and it repeats your previous action. So experiment with that F4. It's really cool when it works. The last thing that I would maybe consider here would be like if you've got net income, this could be a place to do a top and bottom, top and double bottom border. Oftentimes at the end of something larger being summed up, you'll see a top and double bottom. And I maybe could have done that here as well. Just kind of a personal preference of what you would like. I honestly, I probably would. So I'll hit F4 right there because I've done it once. I'll hit F4 there again. So oftentimes we'll just use a single line for a subtotal, and then that single line with the double underline as the final grand total. All right, so we repeated that last action. Bold, italicize, and change the font. All right, so if we look at this, I can see I've got the names up here, the headers. This is just really quick saying if you actually just wanted to change this all to be bolded, you could do one of them and hit Control B, or you could highlight everything and hit Control B, and it will bold them all. I think when I did it the first time, I actually hit one with the Control B. So then when I highlighted all these and hit Control B, it thought it wanted me to turn it off. So then I just have to hit it again. But I could grab all this. I could hit Control B. If I wanted it italicized, I can hit Control I. If I did want to change the color, I don't know that I would, but if I did, I could do something like that. If I wanted to change the font size and the font style, I could do it through something like that as well. I oftentimes just use the default fonts and then might make the size a little bit bigger, might bold them, so sizing and bolding is probably what I do the most. So if it was me for something like that, I probably, and I've started right here, I grab these both, I hit a Control B to bold them, and then maybe I go up to like, not 11, 14, that'd be awful big, but go up to 14 just to put a little bigger header on. If we look back, then we could spell check the document with an F7. Now, the first thing, I think it's going to be easier if I show it to you this way at first. If you're actually highlighting something when you go to spell check it, and you can go to spell check with review, click on the review ribbon, and then spelling, and you can see there's no errors right there. You can get there that way. If you do this a lot, F7 is the shortcut, so F7 would be what you wanted to use. So F7 is how you would get to a spell check. But if you have something highlighted, it's only going to spell check that which is in there. I usually want it to spell check the whole sheet, although sometimes I just want it to spell check what is highlighted. So if I haven't highlighted a group of information at all and I hit the F7, now it's looking at the whole sheet. And I intentionally misspelled common stock so that it would find something on the spell check. I'll click on stock, I'll click change. That's all that it found. Do you want to check at the beginning? Sure. And then click OK. So F7 is your quick spell checker. And then the last two things are really printing and saving, Control P and Control S. And if I were to print right here and do a Control P, you can see it looks pretty good right now. It's all going to print on one sheet. All right. It's going to look all right. Had you done something like had a bigger gap in between these and then you did a Control P, well, it's still working. I I don't know if I saved it that way. Let me look. Nope. Nope. If you had, let's see, I got to make it more obvious. Control P. Yeah, so now you can see it's like printing on two different pages, which you might want. You might, like, where you really wouldn't want it would be something, I think. Now let's go a little more. Let me find, yeah, this would be a bad one. Control P. Now you got the balance sheet and like the income statement headers on one. And then I got to go to the second one where you got the amounts. I mean, don't do that. That'd be horrible, right? So sometimes you can just adjust your content so that doesn't happen. But other times, if you just hit Control P, and maybe I should do it just to make sure we can see how it's going to work. Let's see. All right, so that one will do it. So Control P, I can see that it's going to be messy. I can go to page setup right there and then go to fit to 1 by 1 and then OK, and it's now going to make sure it's all on one page. All right, now, so that page setup, I use stuff like this, fit to 1 by 1 to get it all on one page. I use that a lot. I might change it to landscape. And the other common thing that I do under setup, I don't use margins. I use margins a little bit, I guess. I use those more in Microsoft Word, frankly. Headers, footers, I don't use a lot, but under Sheets, I will use grid lines a fair amount. And I will then go ahead and click OK, and it puts in grid lines. I do that under Microsoft Excel, so sometimes it's just easier to track those numbers across. And then when you're done, if you hit Control S, if you hit File, Save As, I did Control S first, which just basically saved it over my template file. I didn't want to do that. Now I got to go find my new cleaned up template file. But if you do a file, so yeah, Control S will just save, which usually you want to do. I actually didn't want to do that because now my template file has all this stuff on it. But if I go File, Save As, and I'll say Template, I'll say select solution in session, and then I can click on more options if I want to experiment with a different folder to put it in or something of that nature. But right now it would just save it in my folder. So that's kind of the basics, part one. If we go over to the PowerPoint slide, some quick review questions here. To format a number in comma format, which of these should we use? Do you remember the one that we talked about? All right. Wasn't Alt equals. That's to sum them up. Wasn't Alt H9. That's to get rid of a decimal. F7 is to spell check. Control Shift Plus is a quick way to put it in a comma format. Unless you've created a hotkey, and then you would use a hotkey approach. Review question 2. In what ribbon can a user find the AutoSum feature? All right. The AutoSum feature is in, not the home, I don't see it, or insert or page layout. It's here in, I gotta find it. My mouse is kind of in formulas. There's the AutoSum off to the left. Now, that being said, I usually don't recommend using that anyway. I usually would use the Alt equals. So it's in the formulas ribbon. And then the third question, once a hotkey is in place, how do you utilize it? Is it Alt or Control? And then is it a number or a letter? And it is going to be Alt and a number. That'll be your correct one. All right, we've made it through Module 1. Now we're going to go on to Module 2. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to Lesson number 2 then, Module number 2, the basics continued. Here are a variety of the topics that we are going to cover, and let's just go over to the file and start working on it. Now, one thing I'm going to do here's the master guide, and I like to kind of bounce back and forth, and show the step on the master guide, and then go through it in the sheet. So to make that a little bit easier, I'm just going to go move it right next to Module 2. So you can just click on Sheets in Excel and just move them around just like that. So the first two that we're going to do here are inserting and deleting columns and rows. So if I go to Module 2, something we can see is that this information is all kind of scrunched together, and we know that we should, maybe fix that. We learned. We learned how to do that in a previous lesson. But another thing that we actually can notice is that there's not subtotals in here. So normal income statement is going to have a subtotal for gross margin, for operating income, for pre-tax income, and then have a final total for net income. And so let's say you get done, you're like, oh, wow, I didn't put any subtotals in there. What should I do at this point in time? Well, what you can do to insert a row, you could click right on this 6, right click, and then hit insert, and that will insert a row. All right, and then you could click right here and right click and hit insert and insert a row. And then, to use that F4 feature that we talked about last lesson, click right here and just hit F4 and it inserts a row. And then you can go ahead and type in your descriptions and do your formulas to finish this off. How I usually do it, because again, I'm usually not trying to use my mouse. I'm trying to use the keyboard whenever possible, as are, and when I say this is something that most folks that work intensely in accounting and finance do. They try to use the keyboard as much as possible. It's faster. Is I just hit Control plus, and when I'm on my laptop, I need to hit actually Control and Shift to get to the plus. So it's Control Shift plus on my laptop. And then I can go to entire row and hit enter. So again, it's Control plus on my laptop. It's Control Shift plus. Go down here to entire row. I don't know. Some people will do that Control Shift plus, and then I'll actually hit the R to skip right to that entire row. You can see that you can insert different things right here, and the R is underlined, so you can get there with entire row. I don't think I do this enough to do that, but that is something you could do. And then once you've done that once, then just go ahead and hit your F4. Hit your F4 here again, because that repeats your previous action. So again, you're pressing F4 and then you're typing in stuff like gross margin and operating income and pre-tax income and net income. Now, if for some reason you did not want one of these subtotals, and I think I do want all the subtotals, but let's say you didn't want one of them for some reason, or you just had an extra line in here, you can delete a row just like you hit Control plus. To insert a row, you hit Control minus. To delete a row, oops, and I actually bumped it and did the wrong one, but Control minus, and then go down to entire row, and that row is gone. So Control plus and Control minus, insert and delete the rows. Now, I'll go ahead and I will just kind of finish this up. And net sales minus cost of sales is gross margin. And we're going to look at now how we are going to paste this over to the right. All right. So I am right here. Actually, I'm going to be looking at how do we paste this information on over to the right. I think just a quick do. These two, I should have looked at this one first. Is that right here? Let's say that you accidentally, did something like this: C4 plus C5. All right, I'm trying to show the F2 edit feature. So you added sales and cost of sales to get to gross margin instead of subtracting them. Now, you could do different things. I mean, you certainly could just hit Control Z and you could undo that one. You could go up right here with your mouse and with the mouse, this formula bar, and put a subtraction in. I'll Control Z to undo it. But again, try not to use my mouse too much. What I can do is just hit F2. Which will open that formula, and then go back and hit a minus. All right, so again, F2 brings up that cell. I can go back and hit a minus. It's trying to keep my keys on the keyboard. Now, if you do something like this, and let's say you hit X instead. I don't know why you would, but you bump something and you hit enter, and it says, do you want to accept it? And you're like, no, I don't know what that is. I don't know what I've done. And sometimes even when you mess it up, you can't get out of the cell. Then just hit escape until you get out of the cell. So there are some times when you do a formula, and not only can you not hit enter, like there it was going to give me a different suggestion, to fix it, which I don't think was a good one, but sometimes it doesn't even give you a suggestion. It just says what you've done is wrong. And you're like, okay, but how do I get out of here? You just have to keep hitting escape. So I've got the control minus done in here. Now, to go off to the in the master guide here, I want to now work with Control C, Control V, Control R, and Control D. I'm going to do these 4 right there. All right, so I will go back here. Now, if I have this one done once with a minus, to get this off to the right, there's different things that people would do. You could right-click and hit copy. You could right-click and hit paste, and then you could do it again. And don't do this. I'm just showing you different ways that would just be horrible to do it. All right, so don't do something like that. If you're going to the right, you could just drag in the lower right-hand corner as well. Don't do that. It's slower. All right. What most people would do here would just be to hit Control C, and then they would highlight the cells that they wanted to paste into and hit Control V. And that totally works, and that's what I did for the first, I don't know if it was like 15, 20 years of my career. So Control C, Control V, that's Control Copy, and then the Control V is a paste. It works out really well. So Control C, you highlight these cells, you do a Control V. Now, what is even a little bit better, and I learned this, sometimes you still remember where you were when momentous things happened in your life, and for me it was when I learned these next 2 cells. I was sitting there back in 2000, and it was either 2014 or 15. I was over in India, and Sudhir and Anuj, who are probably not listening today, taught me this. You just highlight these cells. You don't hit Control C, Control V. You just hit Control R, which is paste to the right. A lot of people don't know that one, actually, Control R. And the first time they showed me, I was like, wow. And it took me a little bit to get to know, but now that's all I use is Control R. All right. So now a little bit with that what it is, if you go Control C here and then highlight these cells and go Control V, as compared to maybe just highlighting these 3 cells and hitting Control R. It's not like it's that much faster, but you save half second, a second. Those really add up if you do that time, if you do that over the course of a day. And then you also just feel kind of slick. It's kind of a little shot of dopamine. Dopamine for accountants, right? So you can do it. You can do it like that. Whenever I say I'm highlighting, I'm actually just hitting Shift and my right arrow key. So let's just go over with a Control R, right? So that's a way that you can do it. A couple quick points on that. You can go to the cell to the right and hit Control R. You can go to the cell to the right and hit Control R. You could highlight these 2 cells and do a Control R. You could highlight these 3 cells and do a Control R. What you can't do is highlight these 2 cells and do a Control R. I don't know why Excel has that limitation, but if you're trying to paste over more than 1 cell to the right, you have to highlight the original cell with it, with a Control R. So yeah, that's how I would paste to the right with a Control R. So I go down here to operating income equals gross margin minus selling general administrative minus depreciation and amortization. And then I'm just going to go to the right, Control R, and I'm done. And when I said go to the right, I'm on this cell, Shift, 2 arrow keys to the right, Control R, and I'm done. Now, Control C and Control V still do have their place, and I'll talk about that right now. So pre-tax income, I would do operating income minus interest expense. Okay, and now I would go over to the right with my Control R. Let me do that again because I bumped it. So go over to the right with a Control R. But now I have all of this highlighted right now, and it's doing 2 cells above minus 1 cell above. And that's going to be the same thing I want to do in the net income line. 2 cells down, 2 cells above, minus 1 cell above. So right here, I'm going to do Control C and then go right here and hit Control V. Sometimes if I'm actually doing my final paste, like right here is a great time for a Control C, Control V. That's it. I wouldn't not like redo the formula and hit Control R or anything like that. But sometimes if I'm going down to paste and I know it's going to be my final paste. Like I'm not going to Control V multiple times, because you can do a formula with Control C and then you can hit Control V multiple times and have it copy that formula in a lot of different areas. If I know it's my final one, you can actually do the same thing. You can just hit Enter and it operates like a Control V, but you can't you can't actually then do it again. It's kind of like that copying is dead. And usually I just want to copy once, so I frankly do a lot of Control C and just Enter, and it's mainly because my Enter key is bigger than my Control V key, so it's easier for me to find, easier for me to click. All right. Now, the 3-year totals, what I would want to do here, if we go back to lesson 1, let's say I want to add these up, I would certainly do an Alt equals. Now, this is a rare occasion where, in my opinion, it is better to use the mouse, especially the longer that you want to paste down. Because what you can do is just double click right there in the bottom right hand corner, and it pastes that formula all the way down. All right, it's kind of doing the sum of the 3 cells to the left, and it's pasting it all the way down. So that's pretty slick. It doesn't work that way to paste to the right. If it did, then I definitely, would have, in gross margin, I might have just double clicked in the lower right hand corner if it would have pasted to the right. Now, one thing to note on this, like if I do an Alt equals right here, and if I've only got to paste down once, all right, I would never, I'm going to just pretend like it's that, okay? So I'm just trying to, and I just highlighted all that and hit my delete key. But if I Alt equals here, I would never then go right here and double click. It's just way too long, okay? What I would do instead, I hit Alt equals, I'm right in this cell. I can just hit Control D, which is pasting down, and I'm done. I used to, before I knew about Control D, until Anuj and Sudhir taught me about this, I used to, after I did something like this, go back up, hit Control C, highlight my destination cell, hit Control V, and that works. But if you get used to using Control D when it's possible, it's even quicker. So if I go back to just kind of undoing a lot of the stuff I did there. So if I go back to this right here, after I've done this once, I certainly could highlight all this and hit Control D. And if it's only a couple rows or something like that, I absolutely would do it. But sometimes you've got hundreds or thousands of rows, and it's just easier to do that with the double click right there. Control D, just the one thing to note on that, just like the Control R, is that if I want to go down one cell, I can hit Control D. If I want to go down 2 cells, I can't just hit Control D. I would have to keep the original information with me. And put that, I would have to have this cell highlighted along with the next 2 to hit Control D. So that's a lot of Control C, V, D, and R. Those are just non-negotiable Excel tools that you need to know when you're trying to be fast in Excel. Well, let's take a look at now Control A. Yeah, select all columns, contents of the worksheet. I use this one a lot. Now, what Control A does is we might want to fix the column width on all of these right now. And before I kind of taught you just to go click on between the A and the 1 and then double click right there. All right. Well, what you can do, and I Control Z to undo that, as opposed to going to click between the A and the 1, just hit Control A. It highlights your whole spreadsheet. And now I can go up and double click between any of my columns. So Control A, it seems like I frequently like to highlight my whole spreadsheet. I've just got different reasons that I'm doing that for. So I hit Control A lot to highlight the whole spreadsheet. Now, one thing to notice, if I'm out here, Control A highlights the whole spreadsheet. If I'm within some data and I hit Control A, it's only going to highlight the data that's kind of touching where I was. So I'd have to hit it a second time to highlight the whole spreadsheet. So again, I'm out here, I hit Control A once, it highlights the whole spreadsheet. I'm within the data, I hit Control A once, it highlights just kind of the data that's touching that. I hit Control A a second times, it highlights the whole spreadsheet. I'll double click and then we can have something that's formatted better. Now, the one thing that I hadn't done, up above was just the deleted. I don't think I deleted a column. So let's see, I actually inserted a row and I deleted a row, but I didn't do that with a column. So let's go ahead and do that one. This would be an occasion where, like with the B, and I'd set it up that way on purpose, maybe you don't want that extra column there. You go click on the B, you hit Control minus, just like you delete a row, you delete a column. Or usually I'm within my data, I just hit Control minus and I go down to column. Some people, when they do Control minus, will just hit the C to get to column. Some people, when they hit Control minus, you actually can hit your up arrow key and then you're right at the column. That last part, any of these are pretty quickly with your keys. So whatever you want to do in order to get there, I think works. But then let's say that you had arrived and your data looked like this at the start and you actually did want a column right here. You could go click on the B, right click, hit insert. That'll put a column there. But it would be quicker if instead you did a Control Shift plus. And again, I'm doing Control Shift plus because I'm on a laptop. It really is just a Control plus, and then go to entire column, and I've got my column. Similar to that F4 feature that we taught you in the previous module. If you did want to repeat inserting columns, I don't think you'd want to here, but you just hit F4 and it repeats inserting columns. So that's how you insert and delete a column. Highlighting all cells within a line, or then highlighting multiple cells as well that way. So we can see it's either Shift arrow keys, or I talk about a Shift end arrow key, Shift Control arrow keys. What I'm getting at right here is if you want to highlight this range right here, and I'm doing it with a mouse on purpose, but if you wanted to highlight that range, all right, because maybe you're going to change it into $signs. You're going to change it into the comma format or something. You could just grab it like that with a mouse. In my opinion, that's too slow. You just hold down Shift and you use your right arrow key to highlight that. If you want to highlight all these, Shift, hold down your arrow key to highlight them. Now, what you can also do, especially the longer your rows are, the longer your columns are, is that you can do Shift and arrow key or Shift and down arrow key, right? So Shift and down arrow key, and especially if you have hundreds or thousands of rows, that's a heck of a lot faster than clicking on one and just hitting Shift arrow key without the end, or it's really a heck of a lot faster than just dragging with the mouse. All right. Some people like to use the Control key. I think that one works just as well. I just grew up using the Shift end key. So if I go to the master guide, right here, it says either Shift end arrow keys or Shift Control arrow keys. If you did a Shift Control right arrow key, Shift Control right arrow key, and then down arrow key, that's just another way. I use Shift End. Some people like Shift Control. Either one of those is great. I'd say make sure you learn one of them because you're going to use it a lot. So that'll bring us down to this step 10 and 11. So now select an entire row or an entire column, Shift space and column space. That's another way that you can select some items. I don't do this one a lot. So just quick, if you wanted to know it, Shift spacebar highlights a row. Again, Shift spacebar highlights a row. Control spacebar highlights a column. I usually am not just highlighting one row or one column, so I'm probably doing that Shift end arrow key or the Shift Control arrow key instead. But at least you know a couple more tricks that way. I tell you what, we're going to go into open the format cells window now. So what I would have naturally done right here, I mean this doesn't look good right now without the commas. So I would have done Shift and right arrow key and then N down arrow key. And then I would have done, like I taught you the hotkeys in the previous lesson, I would have done an Alt 1, Alt 2, Alt 2 to get those commas in. Now let's undo that for a second. And, oops, I bumped a couple things there. Let's undo that for a second. And let's say that you just want to check out some different options that you have for formatting. You can right click right here and go into Format Cells. And within here, you can do certain things like number with no decimal places, and you could click OK. And whoops, it must not have had the comma there. Format cells, and yeah, use the comma separator. So I mean, you could find some formatting techniques here as well. That was definitely slower than what I showed you. But once in a while, if you want to look at different fonts and fills and different number formats, you can find some stuff in here. So this is like the format cells window. But if you want to get here quickly, instead of right-clicking and going to format cells, we can see what you're going to do is just go to a Control 1. So you have this, you've got Control 1, that pops open for you, and you're like, yeah, maybe I want all of these in $signs with no decimal places. I click OK, and it works, right? So I've got something in there. I don't use that one a lot, but just a little quick quick tip about how you would find that to make changes within the Excel sheet. Merge and center and wrap text. These items are located right here, which is where we're going to start with. And what merge and center and wrap text do. So the merge and center. What this means is that sometimes you might want your header to be centered maybe across your data. So you would highlight this data right here, and then you would click on Merge and Center. You would highlight this data right here, and you would click on Merge and Center. And maybe that looks better, right? Maybe you like that better. Perhaps you'd highlight it and hit Control B to bold it. Maybe you think you should have, an extra row in there. And so you could use what we told you with the Control Shift plus and insert an entire row. So now we've cleaned it up a bit. So people will like to do that. The only thing about that is that, frequently you end up doing something like trying to highlight a certain column in Excel, and if you end up going and touching either of these rows right here, so I'm just kind of highlighting some things, it now all of a sudden highlights everything. You can see because it's thinking that you want everything that's within columns A through E. When you have these merged in center, you can no longer click on column E. All of this information is in column A. All right. So it can happen sometimes where you are, and this is probably more if I have a lot of data and I'm like doing some page ups to try to highlight data, and I was like, oh no, I went too far and now I can't get off of it and it's all highlighted and I have to start over. Just got to trust me that this can be an annoying thing for those working in big spreadsheets. Or sometimes people might have a subheader that they merge and center, within the Excel file somewhere, and then they're highlighting things and it's grabbing extra. So what the fix is around that one, instead of doing it like that, and it's a tick slower, but again, this isn't something you're doing every day, right? You're just kind of finishing your spreadsheet once. You highlight this range right here, and then you click alignment, and then you go to horizontal, and then down to, and I've got my little video timer there, I go down to center across section and hit OK. So again, you highlight the data and the range you want to spread it across. Go to alignment, horizontal, center across section, and then click OK. It takes a little bit longer than the merge and center, but now if someone, is highlighting and they end up going too far, they're not going to get all of their data highlighted. This can actually be a decent thing if you're sending your data to someone who's not as good in Excel that you're afraid that they're going to start clicking on stuff and go too far and now find too much stuff highlighted and get driven crazy. So that is the center across section is what the pros will oftentimes use in that regard. And then if you wanted to get rid of that, I don't even know if you can do two at the same time. I'll go to general. We'll see if it works. Yeah, I don't think you can actually put two in at the same time. Center across section, okay. Yeah, it did work. I don't know if you've always been able to do that. Maybe if you have, that I haven't known that. So, but you can get rid of it. Just do both at the same time. Very slick. I've never done that before. Kind of always fun. When you're teaching something, you sometimes experiment and learn. I'll go, okay. The only other thing to show you here is this wrap text feature. I use that one a fair amount, and why it would be, and this would be, let me think of more of an example here. If you had one column header that was super duper long, selling general and administrative expenses, and let's just say that the company chose, or might maybe be easier here, cost of sales excluding depreciation and amortization expenses. I think I spelled it incorrectly. We learned last session you can hit an F7. I'll just clean it up that way. Okay, F7 spell check, change, now we're good. So what we see here, and some companies will do this, is if you wanted to auto fit, all your columns and you went like that, it's like, wow, that column A is really long. And I just don't know if I want the data separated that far from the headers because it can be tougher to track. But I don't necessarily just want to, and I could do something like this then, but then it's like, well, that's not clean either. So this would be an example where you could click on this and then just go ahead and hit wrap text. And you could see then that it would make this one wider. It makes the row wider at that point in time. And maybe I don't want to have it take up 3 rows. I can manually mess with it a little bit and then double click between the 5 and the 6 to auto fit a row, just like we auto fit a column. And what's happened at that point in time, it's not necessarily like a perfect format, but it still retains the whole column header without making it as wide as it used to be. So I do use wrap text a lot that way. And sometimes I do have a lot of long column headers, just depending upon what I'm looking at. So I might, let's see, I could go like this, and this might not be the best example, but I could click on perhaps all of these right here, and then click on wrap text. So now I've got several of them that have wrapped at the same time. I have because I just clicked on all of this text. Now, you notice that I did not do that with consolidated income statement because that kind of just spills over, and I think that's fine. Whereas like these words, they can't spill into the number columns. That just wouldn't work, right? So that's how you would wrap text. And then I think it's the final one that we're at in this module, right, is the auto fit all the columns. This is a new one that I actually just found out about in the last couple of months, and I started to use it all the time. That if I want to auto fit all the columns, and I'm going to get rid of the wrap text here. So I think the first time that I hit it, it tries to wrap everything. So I have to hit it again. So let's just say that my data looks let's just say it looks like this as an example. It's way too squashed, all right? Well, anywhere on my spreadsheet, I can hit Control A, and as compared to double clicking right between there, that totally works, all right? But as compared to doing that, what I can do is hit Control A, and then the formula is Alt-H-O-I, all right? What I'm doing right there, it is the Alt-H-O-I. So I'll do this. I'll do that again. So I've got it all highlighted with a Control A, Alt HOI. It is now going to auto fit the columns, automatically. Now the point about this one is that if you highlight, let's just say only this data. So you've not highlighted the whole spreadsheet with a Control A. You've only highlighted this data and you hit Alt HOI. It only is going to auto fit what you've selected. That's where this can get kind of slick sometimes. It's like, okay, I don't want to auto fit the whole spreadsheet per se, or I don't maybe need to auto fit the headers per se, but I just want to auto fit the data that I'm selecting. And an example of when I would do that is, let me just delete this for a second. Let's just pretend like this was a lot longer. Consolidated income statement in US dollars. Like maybe that's longer than I need. And then if I just do a, double click right here, it's auto fitting to the header, which I don't need it to do because even if it's smaller, the header kind of spills over, right? So instead, what I might just do is grab this data right here, Alt HOI. Grab this data, Alt HOI, and now it auto fits just the data that I've selected. So I think it has some slick applications that way. That brings us to the end of Module 2, and a couple quick review questions for you. How can a user most quickly copy the contents of a cell into the two cells below the cell? All right, which of these would it be when you're copying down? It's not Control C and Control V. That is pretty quick, but it's not the best. Control R is when you would go right, drag and drop. Don't do that unless you're going down like hundreds or thousands of rows, right? Use the Control D. Review question 5, which feature will increase the height of a row so that the contents of a cell will not spill into the cells to the right? It's not the anchor feature. It's not freeze panes. It's not merging and centering, but wrap text will end up increasing the height of a row, and so that the columns don't have to be as wide, but also the information doesn't spill over. And now it's time for the third module, navigating datasets. So with that said, we're going to jump into the topics to be covered, and we're going to cover about 20 topics in this third module. And without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into it. So the first one here, zooming in and zooming out. Module 3 is right here, and again, I grabbed the master guide and I dragged it next to Module 3. Again, you can just click on it and you can pull it wherever that way. Zoom in and zoom out. So if we look at this, and we're going to do some data analysis and navigating around on this information, if you want to zoom in and zoom out, first off, here, whoops, and I actually just bumped it and nailed it down. But you can use this tool in the lower right hand corner. If you are using a mouse, you can hold down Control and scroll back and forth, and it just lets you see the data a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. Just a quick technique to navigate data sets. And the second one here, if you want to navigate the data set, you can use a Control F to find things. I use Control F all the time in Microsoft products and when I'm out on the web. If I'm using AI, I'm using Control F. So if you wanted to quickly find invoice number 150, you put Control F in there, and it goes right to it. So Control F, you can very quickly find things. Now, if you wanted to see, we actually have customers right here. If you wanted to find transactions with customer 101, you could hit 101 and then keep clicking Find Next, and it would go through the data and find all the transactions that are involving customer 101. That's probably not the best way to do it, but just another way that you could find something. I got to click out of this box then and close it out. If I go to the master guide, 3.3, freeze panes. Big fan of freezing panes. So what this means is right now, if we go down, we might forget what actually data we were looking at above, right? It's like, what do these different numbers and letters represent? So to freeze panes, different ways you could do it. You could just go view, and it's under view, regardless of where you're going, view, freeze panes, freeze top row. And that means you can go down like this and the top row will stay. If you want to get rid of that, just click freeze top row again. Now you go down. Oh, interesting. I have to unfreeze panes. All right, so if you want to do that, you got to unfreeze panes. I could go view, freeze panes. I could freeze the first column, and now if I go off to the right, column A is going to stay there. So that's another way that you could do it. To get rid of that, go freeze panes, unfreeze panes. How I usually will do it is that I'm usually in cell B2 or somewhere close to there in the upper left-hand corner, and I oftentimes want to keep both the column header and the row header. I almost always want to keep the row header, sometimes the column header. And then what I can do is I could do a freeze panes, and I could do freeze panes right there. And that is going to freeze everything above, and it's also going to freeze everything to the left. So that's a slick way to do that. You know, like for example, if I clicked right here, and this would not be a great example, but if I did a freeze panes right here, it's going to just freeze everything above and everything to the left. Sometimes I will actually do that by accident, and then I just have to go, okay, I messed that up, view unfreeze panes, and then go up to, you know, in this data set right here, you know, maybe I will go to that B2 and view freeze panes. All right, back to the master guide. To move to the end of a section of text, all right, that is going to be the control arrow key or the end arrow key. So if I want to just, if I'm right here, so I'm just going to click somewhere in cell A10 as an example. Now, if I want to go down to the end, I'm absolutely not going to do an arrow key down, right? And I'm probably not going to do page down. That would be better. This is page down and page up. Because a lot of times I'm dealing with not just, what does this have, a little over 100 rows, I think. Yeah, I'm right about 100 rows. I might have, you know, several hundred or thousands or tens of thousands rows. I'm just going to hit end down arrow key. So end up arrow key brings me up to the top, end down arrow key brings me down, end to the right, end to the left. You can do that. You can go control up, right, down, left. So I'm doing the control arrow key all over the place here as well, and you can see my cursor flying around. So enter control to get to the edge of the data. Now, home and control home, I do enjoy using those quite a bit. So frequently, you know, people will usually start with their spreadsheets in the upper left-hand corner, and they continue to build them, and then they might, you know, be way down here off to the right somewhere, and then they realize they want to go back to column A. Just hit home if you want to go back to column A. And here, what it actually has done is it's taken me to column B. If you've frozen the panes, it takes you to the first column that's not frozen. All right, so if I unfreeze panes right there, and I'm off to the right, and I hit home, now it goes to column A. If I had the freeze panes on, it takes me to that kind of the first item that's not frozen. Sometimes I'm way off to the right, but then I'm also down quite a bit as well. And then I just do a control home. I actually control home a lot just to get up to the upper left-hand part of my data. Again, if I had frozen some panes, it would take me to the upper left-hand part that was not frozen. So control home to get up to that upper left-hand part of the data. You know, and all these things are helpful. You know, sometimes you might accidentally bump something. I bumped end right arrow key right now, and I'm all the way over in whatever column this is. You can imagine if someone didn't know how to do this kind of stuff, and if they just started arrowing to the left, I mean, they'd be there a long time, right? Or maybe they even just went here and they started to drag over. I mean, you get it done, but if you're right here and you go, oh, I just accidentally bumped, and maybe I'm all the way down, you know, in cell million and whatever column number that is, I don't even know. I bumped all the way down there. Just boom, control home, and you're back up to the top. So control home or the end arrow keys. Remove duplicate rows. This is one that I don't use it a lot. But when I have data where I've been combining it from different sources, and I'm concerned that maybe there was some duplications in those sources, what I can do with when I'm within that data is just hit Alt A M. And now what you can see that it's done is it's highlighted my data, and it says to delete duplicate values, select one or more columns that contain duplicates. All right, so in this situation, I think I'm concerned that my invoice number might contain duplicates. I go and I click OK, and it says one duplicate value found and removed, 97 unique values remain. So I'll go ahead and I will click OK. Now, if I do a Control Z to undo that, and I were to look through here long enough, I could actually find that there's a duplicate value, that there is one of these invoice numbers that's the same. And what it is it's invoice 10009. It's the exact same information. So again, Alt A M, and it is within that invoice number. I go ahead and I'm just going to look for it in invoice number. I hit enter, and that invoice is gone. So you're looking to, I had to select when I did the Alt AM, I had to select which one had the duplicates. Like for example, customer number, I don't think I want to do this one, because if I do it, it's probably going to delete every time it sees the same customer again. 87 duplicate values are found and removed. I mean, I didn't want to do that, because it's okay that I have multiple the customer number in there more than once, because we sold to the customers many times. All right. So if I did that and I messed it up, I would just hit Control Z to get it back. So you got to kind of understand where you might have that duplication that you don't want. Compute the average values. So average, max, min, and median. And then with that, I'm also going to use the F4 feature. So what I'm getting at right here is for the average values, let's just say that we want to know the average amount of the invoice, all right? Well, you could do, and I will just double click right here, and then I will go into cell H4 next to it, and I will type in equals average, open parentheses. I will go to cell D2, shift, end, down arrow key, or you could do the control instead of the end, close parentheses, and enter. And now it's listed for me my average invoice amount. If I wanted to do the max, I could do equals max, open parentheses, go up to the first part of my data, shift and down arrow key, close parentheses, and I could repeat that for median and minimum. Another way that you could actually do this, I have the average done here, is if I just wanted to be a little bit more efficient, when I'm doing that average, if I know I'm going to want to put those other formulas in there, I can go over to my data set here, shift and down arrow key, and then I'm going to actually paste this formula down. I'm going to mess it up here first. So I've got my average. Let's say that I want to paste this down, and I do that with a Control D. I taught you the Control D last lesson, so I paste it down with a Control D, and let's just say that I want to find the max instead. All right, so I've got equals average here, equals max here. Now, the one problem that has happened is when I paste it down, it changes the row number. Excel's trying to be smart and saying, I think I know what you're trying to do here, but in this situation, we don't want it to look at rows 3 to 99 to find the maximum, because then it's skipping row 2, and there is nothing down here in 99. So this is a time we would like Excel to actually keep rows 2 through 99 the same. So when I do equals average, open parentheses, and I go over to this data, and I'm on cell D2 here, shift end, down arrow key, close, and before I hit close parentheses is actually the best place to do it. Just hit F4 right now. And it's locking down the D and the 2 and the D and the 98. So when I hit close parentheses and then I paste down, and I'm going to paste down, I'm just highlighting this range right here. I'm hitting Control D like we taught you before. You can see that it's keeping that D2 to D98 right there. I can hit F2 to edit, and where it says average, I can go in and I can type in max. Where I've got the median, I can go ahead and get rid of the average, and I can type in median. Where I've got average here, and instead I want the minimum, I can go ahead and type minimum, and very quickly I've actually been able to come up with different formulas for my data set. This is a sales table. It's basically what invoice did we have, what customer did we sell to, what product did we sell, how much was it, and on which date. All right. And now I've got my average, max, median, and minimum. Another place that you could end up finding to be useful is really any time that you are going to be shifting around your data. So when you did that average that way, just to explain that F4 feature a little more, and remember F4 also repeats the previous action. That's oftentimes I use that with formatting. But if I did an equals average and I highlighted this data here and just hit close parentheses without doing the F4, I could manually go in right here and I could click on the D2. If I hit F4 once, it's going to lock down the D and the 2. If I hit F4 again, it's only going to lock down the 2. If I hit F4 again, it's only going to lock down the D. If I hit F4 again, it's not going to lock down anything. If I hit F4 again, it's going to lock down both the D and the 2. So sometimes I do want to lock down them both. Sometimes I bumped it and I don't want to lock down anything. Sometimes only the row, only the columns. I can go through and have all those options. So that's kind of just some ways to do some additional techniques here. And then also, it is the way that you can use that F4 feature. I love that F4 lock. I call it the lockdown feature. Sometimes people call it the anchor feature. Now, something I don't use as much, but I just wanted to show it to you in case you hear about it, is the range feature. So what this means, and I'll just get rid of these for a second. If you go into and highlight this set of data right here, you can actually give it a name. Like, let's just say sales amount, and then hit OK. And then I go ahead and I hit OK right there. Actually, what do I want to do? I think I just want to go highlight this and then create a new range for sales. Yeah, it might have been when I actually did a space between sales and amount that it didn't work. But now, whenever I highlight this whole data, it's actually using the word sales right there. I've named that range. So for my average, I could just go equals average, open parentheses, and type in sales, close parentheses. And when I do that with my F2, you can see that it is actually pulling up that range that I have selected right there. So that's if you've got kind of a static set of data that you're going to want to refer to later, and you're just going to want to refer to it as some sort of named range. If you ever want to get rid of that one, I just wanted to show you this one, but I would go in here and I could just say delete range name. And I wanted just to show you this because I frequently forget how to get rid of this one. I go ahead and I click on Name Manager, and then I could go where I have sales right here and then hit the delete key. Do I want to delete that? Okay. Go ahead and close out of this. And now if I go back to this amount and I hit Shift and arrow key, it no longer is called sales. And then right now, if I go up above and I say, equals average sales, I've deleted that sales range. So it's not working. It's not working anymore. So I don't use ranges a lot, but I know some folks like them. So I just just wanted to introduce you to that concept in case someone you're working with says, yeah, do a range. Print titles, page breaks. It's just a couple print features right here. But if you go into Control P to print and you look at this, if it would print into 3 pages right now, and sometimes people don't print to the physical printer that much, but they might actually print for work papers or print what's called a PDF file and then share it for easy display. But if you do it, you can see a problem with that is that it's actually not allowing that, putting that header in there. So when you get onto pages 2 or 3, you might not even be sure what that information is. So if we see print titles and page breaks, what that means is that we could go into page layout, print titles, and then the rows to repeat. Oops, and I actually want to go back into module 3. Okay, so I could now go into print titles, rows to repeat at top 1, and I think I got to do a ... 1, and then do print preview. Okay, excuse me, it's 1:1. And then go print preview. And now when I look at what's going to happen, every time that I go onto page 2, when I go onto page 3, you can see that the title is going to stay. Now, if you wanted to have this more evenly spaced out on those pages, it looks like we have, how many is this? 96 transactions, maybe every 35 or something like that. And I'm not sure why that bumped. I accidentally put an equals in there. We'll get rid of that. But maybe every 35 transactions, we just want to we just want to have a break. So I could actually do breaks, insert page break right after 35, and then I could do it again right after 70. So again, I'm on page layout. I could do breaks, insert page break, so that now if I do a Control P, I've got more of an average amount on each page. And I'm kind of I'm paging up and paging down and taking a look at it. This is one of these where you can just play around to just see what kind of printing will work for you. But sometimes you print with page breaks. We've already talked about in the page setup that you could fit one by one. That would be another way to do it. But in this one, I don't think we'd want to do one by one. It would just make it too small. So we would definitely want to print with titles, and then maybe we could more evenly space it just if we wanted to do it. So some different printing techniques. Back when I learned Excel, we constantly printed, so we spent a lot more time with those. Hide a column, hide a row, Control 0 and Control 9. So you could do a Control 0 right here. It hides row E. To get it back, I just kind of go on either side of it and double click, and that'll auto fit all my rows, and I can get it back. Maybe I want to hide this row right here. It's invoice number 10075. Control 9. Now that one's gone. If I go on either side of it, double click, it's basically auto fitting all those rows. So that's if you're going to be hiding columns and rows. I don't do that one a whole lot, but just kind of showing you some quick stuff. Things that I do all the time. I can see that move to the previous Excel worksheet and the following Excel worksheet. So I'm bouncing back in here a lot right now between module 3 and the master guide. All right. I'm doing this with a control page up and a control page down. So if I could do control page up all the way to module 1, I could do control page downs all the way through module 9, which is the second part of my Excel series. That is how I can get through the information. Just control page up, control page down. I do those all the time. And then also it says master guide here, the alt tab. Toggle between open programs. So when I alt tab right here, it's just showing the different programs I have open. I have a timer open. This is my recorder. I've got my PowerPoint open. I've got different things kind of for my video software in here. It's called Camtasia. My PowerPoint not in slideshow view, and I can go back to my Excel file. So alt tab, that's what I'm pretty much done with this file right now. So I'm going to alt tab back to my PowerPoint slide. All right, so Alt Tab gets you between those. So those are just some items that I will use. Some more than others. I use the find a lot. I freeze page once. I use the home features a lot. I use that F4 lockdown a lot. Those are things. I use the control page up, control page down a lot. The Alt Tab a lot. All right. Some of the others are more unique. Review question 6, just a couple review questions as we wrap up what we did here. To move to the next Excel sheet, a user would press which cells? So if you're looking at this, which cells would a user press to get to the next Excel sheet within the same file? Well, it's not going to be Alt Tab. That's going to toggle between open programs and files. It's not going to go to control page up. That would go to the previous sheet. It's not going to do F4 or just typing in those dollar signs. That's going to be like the lockdown or the anchor feature. It is control page down to get to the next Excel sheet. All right. How about review question number 7? If a user wishes to move to the top left part of the data within an Excel spreadsheet, which feature should they use? Take a peek at that one. Do you Do you know this? It's not Alt-Tab, right? That's getting between our open programs and files. It's not Control-End. That was one we actually didn't really cover in the data, but that would get us to the bottom right-hand corner of the data that we have open. I don't use that one quite as much. It's not Control-Page Down. That's going to give us basically get us through the spreadsheet, all right? But but not to the end and not to the right that way. So it's going to Control-Page Down would get us to additional files within that spread or additional tabs within the spreadsheet. It would be Control Home. That's what would take us down to cell A1. That's what would take us up to cell A1, or if you're frozen panes, to the first item that is not frozen. That'll bring us to the end of this tutorial. I certainly hope that you learned a lot of tricks that you can apply as you go forward. I'm sure everyone learned at least a few. Apply them. You're going to get a lot faster. Going to make your life happier, make you more efficient in Excel. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Take care.